Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. NBA playoffs kind of already started. We had some play-ins, which aren't technically the playoffs, but boy, oh boy, has the entertainment factor been sky high. I have enjoyed the initial start here quite substantially, but we really get serious this weekend where we have 4 games Saturday, 4 games Sunday. Really, really good playoff field this year. Some really good matchups, and a lot to talk about. And so to help us sort all this out, Shipper at Ship the Justice on Twitter, who is an advantage player of all sorts and really, I would say a basketball content aficionado more so than anyone else. Really, really curated opinion when it comes to this is good basketball content.
Which low post is the good one?
Which low posts are good and which are trash. And the proportions this season were not great, unfortunately, but that's okay. We got some good ones in there. First time guest on the Deep Dive, Shipper. Welcome.
Thank you, Drew. Yes, I am a low post aficionado. I tilt every single time. Like every show is terrible, unless it's Kevin Pelton, and then Kevin Pelton is incredible. Like, how is it not just Kevin Pelton every single time?
I think maybe just resting on the laurels of having such a fucking good name for a show. Like, he just kind of wandered into having a great name, but. Yeah, it's fun. Like Drew said, I'm in Central Time. Like I never like watching sports on the West Coast, but it's kind of nice for these games because even I go to Timberwolves games. I kind of cheer for the Timberwolves. I still didn't stay up for the whole game. I'm like, they're gonna lose. It's gonna be a mess. Like shit started so late. I'm like, why would I stay up and watch them bungle this at this point? And honestly, it might be the same thing tomorrow. But what I have taken in has been great. And I'm super excited about it. It's the only part of the season I like.
You missed you skipped a good quarter and overtime to skip, I think, because they set basketball back a good 10 years.
Oh yeah, I caught up on the tweets, or just
it was brutal.
You go back in the NBA chat we're in, and you go back and scroll back through the people that were live, commenting on the game the night before. It's like, ooh, it's like they're talking about a college game.
So, what do you think is like the true expectation of offensive efficiency for Minnesota in that fourth quarter and overtime? Like, how many do they get? How many good shots do they get? In 17 minutes of 17 minutes of basketball.
Oh, it was pulling your hair out because if they had been more physical, if they'd been more aggressive, they weren't settling for garbage looks. They probably could have gotten more whistles. Like everybody was tweeting about the disparity of free throws and stuff. And it was like, that was self-inflicted. Like they really and truly could have, if the refs they were willing to call it 2 ways. That was not, ref bias in my opinion. It was literally the Timberwolves running horrific offense. And like, I get it. Like the Timberwolves are kind of one dimensional without all the bigs available. And so maybe that was part of the problem. They felt like this is the only thing we can do. But that was really, really rough. Before kind of getting into the playoffs though, and kind of commenting on the state of the NBA, I just want to kind of set you up here as sort of the subject matter expert that I know that you are when it comes to basketball, because like it's really we do 2 pods a week all NFL season talking NFL. We could do 3 if we felt like it. We could do 5 if we felt like it. I ended up doing 5 a week with Jay for NBC all season talking NFL, just because I can do, I have enough of a base of knowledge to be able to do it. NBA is a lot tougher for me. Like I almost can only look at it through the lens of handicapping and numbers. And I definitely don't understand the game to the degree that you do. What is your background? And would you say that in terms of just, subject matter expertise, is basketball the top for you among all the sports you play?
Yeah, I mean, outside of swimming, I think swimming's got to be number one, and that's the common thread that you and I share, Drew. Is yeah, love getting in and busting out a 400 freestyle here and there. No, I played a little bit, very poorly. Can't dribble with my left hand, can't shoot jump shots. But I got into coaching kind of early. My final year of college, I coached a JV team, and fortunately, we were really good. I was then the varsity coach of the same high school team. Again, we were really good just because the JV kids got a year older, and then they were good again. And then was an assistant coach in the New Zealand National Basketball League. So I kind of wanted to do it as a bit of a career. And then after, figuring out that it wasn't going to make any money unless I got lucky and got a head coaching job in the league, needed to pivot elsewhere. And through that time, I was kind of betting all the time, and yeah, that's kind of where the subject matter expertise comes from. But that being said, like I probably listen to every single episode of Dunk On of all time. I've listened to like I just like walk around with it in my ears like 24/7. I go to sleep with a podcast on out loud. My lovely fiance, she allows me to sleep with the with low post going in the background, and yeah, it's very good. So I'm trying to consume as much content as possible, even if I don't think that any of it's any good. Yeah, just always trying to learn about the NBA and about basketball in general.
I know you see people. It's one of the dumb Twitter arguments where I think people just want to let people know that they read a Wikipedia article about the green lumber fallacy, but like, oh, you know so much about one sport, that's not actually going to help you. You should just grind numbers and go top down. Like, no, like legitimately, basketball is freaking complicated when it comes down to it. Like that's what I struggle with. Like just especially when you get to the playoffs, and I talk to smart people, or even just Drew about like how much does the coaching matter in this series, and people like Spoon have put us onto that. I mean, we talked about assistant coaches for a bunch.
Sure.
Shit, I mean, we had an assistant coach right here in the show with us, but it's there is so much going on below the surface. Like, do you think the coaching helped? Like at some level, just getting you, I mean, thinking more about the X's and O's of shit like that.
Yeah, definitely. But it's probably more like the opportunity to talk to some really, really smart people.
Okay.
Is like, you get in the league and like I really don't know that much. Like you are then able to discuss this with really high level coaches. Guys like there's a guy, Zico Coronel, who now coaches in Japan. He went over and spent a couple of weeks with Mike D'Antoni just trying to learn the system there. And like this guy's just a walking encyclopedia of basketball. And getting in the league means you talk to him all the time. And these things are just like that you learn more in one day than you've learned the last like 8 years trying to study this sort of stuff. So it's just crazy like how much these coaches know. They just have no idea what the like effect size of things are, and things like that. And so that's where the betting background like comes in, and you can blend the two of those together.
It's probably my favorite thing we've ever experienced. Like just getting to talk to people on and off the air is like when you really run into somebody like that, where it's like, holy shit, you know more about this than anyone I've ever talked to in my life. It's like the saying, you don't know what you don't know. And it's like, I mean, we've had conversations that have kept me up at night. It's like how little I knew about a subject until you talk to somebody who just lives it. And that's, I mean, it's funny. We talked like we're talking about Adam Bourne off the air. Like one of the conversations we had with that guy after a Calcutta off the air, and like the knowledge he was spitting at us one day.
Yeah. And I think like a really good example of that would be like, so Nate Duncan does Dunked On every single day, produces 200, probably 300 hours of basketball content, like all about strategy. The only thing he cares about is that he's like relatively clever, not amazing, but relatively clever, right? Like, and he's been on the forefront of basketball strategy the entire time. If he tried to coach the Minnesota Timberwolves, they would be running exactly what the Minnesota Timberwolves ended up running. Like, how are we going to get Cat a touch against Austin Reeves? Oh, we'll just chuck it to him against Austin Reeves, right? Like, whereas the people who are high level coaches, they're like, oh, I need Cat to do 4 or 5 things because this is exactly what the defense is going to do when he does this, and then I get a catch here. Like these people are thinking way, 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 way ahead of anything that we're thinking of.
Oh, that's very cool. You bring up Dunked On and Nate Duncan in general. Like, there was one season where I was literally like, okay, my homework is to figure out what he's talking about. Like, I'm going to listen to this until I get it. Like, this is, it'll make me smarter. It'll help me understand the game better. But like, there's the thing that I wish I had a little, and it eventually didn't pay dividends at all. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, it's a pick and roll, whatever. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me really still. But the thing I wish I had a little bit better eye for, and I'm sure you do, because I at least knowing, seeing what just in general, your background affords you, but the ability to kind of evaluate players on like by eye is really, really, really tough. Like, we can do it with quarterbacks in the NFL because I know what to be looking at on any given play, right? Like, you can get a sense of it if you have a little bit of a decent background. And I definitely don't have it for NBA players. And just, do you feel like at this point, you can look at a guy's, just contributions on the floor and you're like, okay, that guy is a this, right? He will, his arc, his Darko arc is going to look like that. Like, he's most likely going to, grow into this type of role. His most effective role is this, and this team needs that, or this team's not going to utilize that. Like, when it comes to kind of mental model for just coming up with, player level, rating, do you know what to look at and kind of get that pretty quickly?
Yeah, I think like the thing that it allows you to do is it fills in the blanks for you. So you see this guy, you see Robert Covington's RAPM, and then you're like, well, he kind of sucks in the box score. Like, what is he possibly doing that's really, really valuable, that's showing up on the scoreboard, but it's not showing up on the box score? And so you're like, oh, he kind of like shoots it off movement, and he is really long, and so he deters drives at the rim and things like that. And then you're like, wait, he can't really guard anybody, and like the shot doesn't go in sometimes. And so coaches think like, quite often the casual observer will just think that he's bad, but like the numbers tell me consistently like this guy is really good. What am I missing? And so it's being able to like probably see those areas, and then you're like, oh, well, movement shooting must be really, really valuable. Just having size at the rim must be really valuable. These things that we think of, but then you can start to think about, okay, what's the effect size of this sort of thing? And then you see like the opposite, where Avery Bradley or Davion Mitchell or someone who like can put the cuffs on anybody and look amazing guarding the ball, but they just don't make any impact to the scoreboard, because you start to figure out that okay, like guarding the ball must not just really be that valuable at all.
And it makes me think too, and it's so valuable. And obviously, it's more of if you have good information, you're going to get good numbers because of guys sitting out, guys being injured too. But I think about like the analog to baseball pitching, and it's more of an eye test. I think, Drew, you kind of hit it in football. It's more of an eye test sometimes, where we can tell like this guy's not 100% because he's not doing what he's supposed to do. But you see it in baseball where it's like, this pitcher is hurt, because you can see spin rates, velocity, just, the break on certain pitches. Is there anything to that in the, these granular stats, or even the eye test in the NBA or, basketball in general, I guess, where you're like, I don't think this guy's 100% because this is what I expect from him, and it's just not happening.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that correlate to athleticism. There are things that correlate to effort. And so when you see these statistics, drop off or rise up, then you can kind of tell whether a guy is healthy or not. Offensive rebounding, steals and blocks often are attributed to athleticism, and they kind of like drop off as a career goes on as well. Rudy Gobert this year, his block rate dropping off, that might not actually be that impactful, the block rate itself dropping off to him as a player, but it's probably just what it indicates about his lack of athleticism, or his athleticism waning, and that is the impact that's going to have on the floor. It's what it implies rather than what the blocks actually matter.
Yeah, I mean, we only traded like 9 first-round picks for him, so it's fine. It'll be fine.
Well, let me ask you: did you watch the full Thunder game last night?
I did not. I was out at dinner with your friend Jay Croucher and my mutual friend Diggs, and we were actually as Jay tweeted, we sat down next to Nikola Jokic. So a lot of chat going on about how the Nuggets are going to fare this year, and hopefully Jokic just had his head down the whole time. So
did Jay bring up awards markets?
Yeah, obviously there was a lot of ranting about the idiocy of the voting. But
yeah. Well, the voting block is low IQ. I don't know what to say. So I was going to ask you about the Thunder because it's like at different times in the game, you look at the score sheet, you're like, it was really tough to tell like if you were going to give an MVP of the Thunder for that game, like. Was probably Lou Dort, which is insane because Giddey and Shea went back and forth having such incredible offensive contributions, but like Dort really got in Ingram's space, and it was, it felt impactful in the game because, for huge chunks, like the entire offense was best served going through Ingram for the Pelicans. They didn't have anything else really that was working for them. Trey, whatever, for whatever reason, Murphy just, disappeared in the second half. And I don't know, I guess, do you find that there are some things that are still missing when you look at some of the advanced statistics compared to, when you sit down and watch kind of a high leverage game like that and, kind of draw some opinions about who you think matters most?
Yeah, absolutely. There's obviously the, if you take somebody's EPM or their DACO or whatever all-in-one number metric or even an ensemble of these, that's how things play out on average. If Lou Dort doesn't have anyone to guard, then he's probably not very valuable, right? Like he's just going to be like denying the ball to Mike Conley or something. And it's like, well, it's not really that, now the team's playing 4-on-4 and yeah, you remove their best offensive player, but he's their best offensive player by like a tiny little bit or something like that. Mike Conley's probably not a great example given.
No, that's what's coming.
Year,
yeah.
But yeah,
that's the next plan.
Yeah. Like he's going to, so him denying Anthony Edwards, like how much better is it for Anthony Edwards to get the ball and try and score in isolation against a random defender than like, okay, now Dort is like face guarding Edwards and you're playing 4-on-4 with Conley and Cat running pick and roll. Like that might actually just be a better offense. Yeah, he can shut down that one guy and that can be quite valuable, but it might only be valuable against the Pelicans where like they are screwed if Ingram isn't getting a catch. And then it's like not valuable against the Wolves where they have some other things that they can potentially do. So yeah, like it's all very contextual. Figuring that fit stuff out and like how much the matchup stuff is going to matter is like quite difficult because the thing is like everyone talks about matchups and I think matchups are important in the end and they're also very descriptive, backwards looking, they're very descriptive, but trying to predict it is quite difficult because yeah, you've thought of this sort of stuff, but of course the coaches have thought about this sort of stuff as well. Like, yeah, like Lou Dort's going to deny the pass to, he's going to deny a pass or whatever. So we know exactly what we're going to do to counter that. So these guys have already thought through these sort of things, and so the matchups end up being different things than what you kind of had expected.
Yeah,
we say that all the time when we talk NFL too. We say, hey, if two assholes on a podcast are talking about this, I'm sure Andy Reid is aware that this might happen at some point. Things like that, and and it's funny too that the context in which because I just don't. I listen to some Duncan because I like it. I think this was like 2 years ago, Drew. I was trying to take in a bunch of NBA content. It was for the bubble. There was no other sports. I'm like, hey, I want to take in a bunch of NBA content.
Yeah,
and I had all day. I was like driving somewhere. I listened to like 8 NBA podcasts and God, it was horrible. First off, it was horrible. Like some of the shit was just horrid. And then I asked you after like 3, because the rest queued up didn't seem any better. And I listened to some Duncan. Obviously it was good. The strategy talk, he just disagrees with how every team plays. It seems like that was the episode I listened to, but it was good. There was some good context here, but like you're talking about the matchup thing, the NBA content I take in is just random tweets I see come across where somebody's explaining why they put together like a 5-leg same game parlay. And it's like, well, based on this matchup, like ants going over his points and rebounds, of course. And it's like, so that's the context I see in the most, and obviously probably not how you're using it. I just wonder, when you get to that point, you say like, here's how I think this works. Is like, if this defender's on ant, if then, but the coach knows this too. Like, are you able to use previous situations with like two other similar teams in a situation, or what like Finch has done when he's faced defenders of that ilk or a team setup like that, to kind of get a feel for here's what that coach does to counter that chess move. If then, and then this is the likely outcome for the Timberwolves offense today.
Yeah, like I just don't think that being in the business of trying to predict that is going to be that fruitful. Like spending that much time.
Yeah, no, it sounds hard.
Trying to deal with that is ever going to be that valuable. To sort of get on to like more of the main topic today, I spent some time like looking at what happened, what the difference is between regular season and playoffs, playoff games, because like, you know, the typical way that people would say to beat the NBA is, okay, you come up with your player ratings, and you have typically, this will just be an ensemble of all of the all-in-ones, and then you project out minutes, and then you have some other stuff that will go in home court, rest, coaching advantages, whatever. Like that's fine and good, and that's all going to work in the regular season when you have these teams playing against each other. But I think if I'm going in, and this is kind of the point of this podcast, is to try, okay, how do you figure out how to beat the NBA playoffs? So it's a very liquid market. It's a beast, right? Like if you're just like taking these all-in-one ensembles, you got no shot. That's already like in the market. You're going to really, really struggle. So what are some unique things that we can think about how to go about it here? So today I was taking a look and you know, intuition says that we get more switching in the playoffs. We get you know, teams start to go smaller, and you know, centers get played off the floor. Blah 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 blah. And so now, how can we like back that up by numbers, and then what actually happens in these situations? So the long and short of it, really, of what it spat out was that isolation scoring increases, and then the system buckets decrease. So system buckets being guys running off of screens for threes, you know, dribble handoffs to get Tyler Hero a shot or Max Strus a shot or whatever, like that, all that bullshit, it all goes away. Like, you know, Duncan Robinson running off three screens, like the guy trailing him might get nailed because he doesn't know the screen's there. The coach in the playoffs, the coaches scouted that and they know exactly what to do. And, you know, even the dumbest defenders become quite good in the playoffs, guarding man like Dion Waiters, J.R. Smith. These guys have all gone from being like complete idiots in the regular season, and then like J.R. Smith just has the cuffs on Klay Thompson because the stuff that Klay Thompson is like running in the regular season, you know, all this random movement all this bullshit random movement that Golden State runs just does not work in the playoffs. Like it works when Steph is doing some stuff, but like Klay doing a split cut and hoping that a player falls asleep, blah blah blah, like that stuff just doesn't work. And so now, like, how do we go about exploiting that? So one, like, I kind of didn't really get to many answers when I was figuring out these questions, but kind of what I wanted to ask some of you guys is, you know, if we now know that the data shows that we're going to have, you know, centers get played off the floor a little bit, you need more switching, and you need you probably need some guys who can score in isolation. Like, how would you go about, you know, changing your all-in-one metrics or your ratings from there?
Yeah,
Vibes.
I mean, just and real quick, you know, I don't make NBA numbers. I don't bet NBA during the season. I don't want to like, because I don't want to put words in your mouth and say that, you know, the real, you know, also minimalizing everything you just said was like, it's not that just defense gets better or it's easier to plan defense because, I mean, your defensive assignment, well, I mean, a little bit, I guess. Your defensive assignment for the next half a dozen games becomes very, you know, essentially the same guy. Yeah. And, you know, but in my head and thinking to the analogs in football, defense is so reactive. Like, isn't there, you know, at the simplest level in my pea brain on this, it would just think like, why aren't we able to figure out different things on offense too? If you have the same defensive sets, the same defensive matchups for the next 4 to 7 games, is the answer just like, well, ISO becomes easier in that?
Doesn't become easier, but it becomes more important.
Okay.
Right.
No, and that's exactly right, and that's what the data shows too. Is that ISO definitely does not become more efficient. It's just that you have to do more of it. Yes, exactly. Because and the thing is that the numbers show that more people have to, you have to ISO more, or like in the playoffs, even if you take a weighted average of what they did in the regular season versus what they do in the playoffs, like teams isolate more as they get into the playoffs. But the teams that are really good are the ones who don't have to ISO because their shit is still working.
Right.
So it's like a really weird dichotomy where like, oh yeah, you need good ISO guys because you're going to have to ISO more. But ideally, you don't have to ISO. Your stuff just still works. Like they can't take you out of it. Like, and that was why the Warriors, when KD was there, they were so unguardable. And the only thing that you could possibly do was just switch every time because it's the only way to get them out of their stuff. And if you don't get them out of their stuff, they are going to score 1 million points.
The other problem with that, and like, okay, so the other thing about ISO is that like there's some players, there's only a handful of guys that can really do it well.
Well, and Drew, I mean, just question for either of you is like, is there examples of this during the regular season where it's like, hey, this was a game, because you can see it. I mean, even just casual observers like, oh, they don't give a shit about this game because it's December. But there are games during the regular season where it's like, man, they game planned, they ramped up, like they're running this game differently.
You're talking like 2% maybe.
Yeah, it is a
really
small sample,
number.
but there are
really small.
There are examples of games, and like, is there anything to take away from those games?
Yeah.
When you get to playoff time, it's like,
well, yeah,
this team is able to get around.
I guess a good example would be like if you get a 2-3 matchup in the East between the Celtics and the Sixers. They played a game right before the Super Bowl, and that was like in the 2% where they really care. Both teams really were, kind of showing their hand a little bit.
I wish they'd let you know ahead of time because I didn't watch those ones.
Well, you can still find that tape. It's out there.
I know, but I'd watch it live.
Like I definitely remember sitting down and watching that one and being like, oh man, the Sixers are screwed. Like if they run into the Celtics in the playoffs, they don't have answers for that or that. Like they're done. Like they're not going to be able to solve this. Cause I think of a playoff series in basketball a lot as this is a puzzle for the coach and his staff to solve, right? Like your opponent is solvable, presumably, right? Like if it's the KD Warriors, it's not, but otherwise, it's solvable. And it takes some time. The good coaches can figure it out in 2, 3, 4 games. Like you've seen it all. And then games 5, 6, and 7 just become what small adjustments can you make? What tendency breakers can you introduce? And the teams that have good tendency breakers, I think, are just teams that in general surprise in series. Teams that have more, just multiplicity. So I guess a good example is, and like, I feel stupid because I didn't make any money on this yesterday watching Thunder Pelicans, but like going into that game, I was basically like, at some point in this game, the Pelicans are going to figure out that they have to double SGA on ISO. Like they have to. Like they're going to figure that out, and then the Thunder offense is going to dry up to nothing, right? Like that's kind of the way this is going to go. Watch the first half. There was very, very, very little SGA ISO by design, because Digano maybe is a really good coach, and he was basically like, I'm just going to put this in my back pocket and save it for the third quarter. And as long as we're kind of within reach at halftime, we're going to be able to close the gap and maybe take a lead into the fourth quarter. And that's kind of exactly what I saw play out in the most of the third quarter. Now, SGA played, he broke tendency also in terms of his rotation. SGA played almost the entirety of the third quarter, set out very little bit in the fourth, and then was right back on the floor. And so it was a little bit of a caught Green by surprise, I thought. And if he had rolled out with just heavy ISO SGA in the first quarter, and then at halftime, Green can be like, okay, now we know we got to double him from here on in. Like, your basic, if we had seen a lot of that in the first half, I would have been like, oh my God, Pelicans second half, Thunder, second half under. Thunder are going to score 40 points here, because as soon as they make that adjustment, like this game's over. And a lot of playoff games go that way.
The way they bust it, I caught the last 6 minutes of the game at a bar. And the way that they busted it was they had Giddey playing center and setting screens. And so he would slip, and, they double Shea really high. And like Giddey getting the ball 4-on-3 is like a disaster for the defense, right? Like this guy's an amazing passer. He's essentially just perfect as a Draymond Green in that position. And that was just like so easy for them. And that was how they scored down the stretches. They had Giddey as the screen or the release valve. And so like, that's the thing. It's like, okay, yeah, sweet. Like we might be able to think about the first thing that happens and like the first counter that the coaches may put in it, but like the other coach is really smart and like he will figure out how to counter it. And like maybe he won't, but maybe he will as well. And so like trying to figure out these like these micro adjustments, I think can get you in a little bit of trouble because it boils things down into one state and you're like, oh my God, this coach has just thought of something that I could never think of. It's like when, when AI figured out how to play Go or chess or whatever, they just do this like crazy shit. And you're like, oh man, I like had no chance of thinking of that. So the game set is just completely different to what I could have expected.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a couple points that you made that I can build on a little bit. You're right, 100% right, that if a team doesn't have to go there, they don't want to. And if you can get by with a 4-0, 4-1 early in the playoffs because you're that much better than your opponent and you don't really have to kind of give away your strategy, that's huge advantage. Keep all that in your back pocket. That's why, playoff path is pretty important. And I think, the length of the series matters an enormous amount. Game one and game, like every game of a series has like a different, this is what to expect based on the current, the current win-loss, the current situation. That's why like they can, and I say this, like, I don't think I don't know that they will ever price this correctly, but the team that's down 0-2 going home in the first half, like, whatever that coach has got in his back pocket, every single adjustment he could possibly think to introduce, he's got to deploy it all. Like he's out of time.
That's like the one. That's like the one thing I know about the NBA playoffs. Like,
the
0-2 going home.
Yeah, and it
makes me
people are like, yeah, because the crowd's giving them energy because they want to win more at home. It's like no,
you don't want to go down 0-3.
Yeah, no.
But it makes me think, and I'm using entry point kind of as a generalized term here because maybe by entry point I mean you're betting X amount on a game because you think the number's wrong or you think that whatever you're entering on game one, game two, like entry point being like, all right, they've solved this. I really just don't think the other coach is going to solve the other things. And the fact is these playoff series, they become anchored to the opening numbers. Like you're just never going to, and obviously a huge injury could change things. Durant gets hurt in one of those Warriors series and the numbers changing, but it's so anchored to the opening, or actually, the closing numbers in game one. You're not going to stray far from that. And I think you see people, I've seen smart people make really good bets late in the series because it's like, well, the market's just not going to move far enough for what we've seen.
The total can never go down enough for some series, right? Yeah. If it starts at 235 and that gets to a game 7, like it almost guarantee you under is a plus EV bet because it can never really get low enough to what it ought to be, as far as I can tell you.
The further and further into the series that you get, the further and further it gets away from like what the like team's normal type of basketball is. And like the reason for that is, as you say, it's all a puzzle and it just gets solved. It's like, fuck, everything's solved. What am I going to do? I'm going to isolate. I'm going to go and target their worst defender and I'm going to try and force a switch because they're switching everything. And if they don't switch, like we have all these counters and we're just going to score. And like the finals last year was like a really good example. And this is why the Warriors are so this is why one player is worth so much on a team like the Warriors is like they, their best 5 that they had out there with Wiggins and Draymond and Clay, Steph, and then Looney, they're going Boston are going down every single time. And their only possible choice is to go try and get Steph. Like that's it. That's the only thing you can do. The Warriors pre-switch the shit out of it. So then you only get Steph with 6 seconds to go. It's how efficient is this? Is it possibly going to be? And then okay, if you don't have Wiggins in there and you have Poole, now you have 2 spots to pick at. Yeah. You get it faster, and Poole's a worse defender, so you get it. It's really hard for them to keep two guys out of the action all the time. You're getting Poole on Tatum with 14 seconds. Like the offensive efficiency difference between getting Steph with 6 seconds and getting Poole with 14 seconds is probably legitimately like 15 points per 100 possessions, something like that.
Crazy.
And so like that is why just having one extra defender, and like it all compounds, if you have 4 guys, getting the 5th guy that can also guard, or like, having 4 guys that can guard instead of 3, like it's all really exponential. It's like cluster injuries in the NFL, I suppose. And like that was kind of the thing, one of the takeaways that I had from looking at these numbers today is like getting, if you can't put 5 switchable defenders on the court, or at least 4 switchable defenders where like you can keep guys out of the matchup for plenty of time until it's late clock, and then it's like, okay, we can kind of deal with this. If you can't do that, you're probably going to struggle defensively, and you're going to struggle quite a lot defensively. I think in the playoffs.
Okay, now this makes
as things get deeper. Sorry,
this may come across.
This is not making me feel good about my Wolves, you guys. Fuck, we're done. Wow, get the Nuggets. It's not going to go well.
This may come across as sour grapes because I lost a decent amount on the finals last year, backing the Celtics. The Warriors, I feel like, were humongous beneficiaries of the fact that there wasn't really a good way to scout them. There wasn't a lot really known about what that, core was going to play like, because I think that, going into the playoffs, and this was one of the more talked about things, they've played 10 minutes together all season, right? Like it was a little bit of like a huge unknown as to exactly what Kerr was going to do rotationally. And I honestly don't have especially high grade on Kerr as far as a coach goes. I think a lot of it is on court coaching by Steph, but that's maybe, a little bit of a bias, a little bit of a blind spot, who knows? But I think the Warriors benefited tremendously from being a little bit of an unknown quantity. And I think they benefited tremendously from just in general, last season was almost entirely about fatigue, from what I can tell you. The teams that, had gas in the tank late were just better. They just were. And, the Celtics played too hard, too many games, too many minutes for their key guys down the stretch of the regular season, played too deep into the Bucks series and the Heat series. And it all came to a head there because like the Warriors barely had to lift a finger to get through the West. Their key guys played a third of the amount of basketball as the Celtics over the balance of the season, including the playoffs. And, I think it all manifests in, just huge advantages in those small areas, because otherwise I'd still think the Celtics were a better team. But
no, I mean, Drew, what goes to shit when you have tired legs besides your jump shot? Like, it's defensive effort, all kinds of that. Yeah. And, it's over. So it's stupid to bellyache about it. But if we take the lessons learned there and we carry it forward into this season, isn't it insane to think that the Phoenix Suns are not last year's Warriors?
I mean, potentially. It is kind of hard to say on that front. I think the one thing more than fatigue is like you have like 2 game states. I think the Celtics are better than the Warriors when they're playing like real basketball, where like you're running normal stuff. Sure. And like the answer isn't like pick on the worst defender every time. But like when it gets down to playing late series basketball, which that's not real basketball. Literally, you just point at the worst defender every time, and he goes and his guy goes and sets a screen, and like the other team is like scrambling to make sure that he doesn't have to defend the screen for as long as possible. Mm-hmm. And like I went to Game 5 in person in San Francisco in a 2-2 series, and like that was genuinely every single time down the floor. They're just like point, and like they're just sprinting up to set a screen, and that like so I think. Early in series and early in rounds, you're going to get, okay, which team is better at real basketball? We can look at a lot of stuff that's just like normal basketball. Another good example of this is like the Mavericks against Phoenix, right?
Yeah,
when the Mavericks were playing like normal basketball, they were screwed against Phoenix. Phoenix is an amazing normal basketball team.
Yes.
Now, what happens when like, oh, Chris Paul has to guard like Jalen Brunson with 5 guys spread out? Like, it's probably not going to happen. So once they figure out how to play a game that's just like completely non-representative of what they were doing throughout the regular season, that's when the series can change. And so like trying to figure out who's going to win normal basketball is good, and that's going to help you. That's going to help you figure out the first part of the series. And then you have to figure out, okay, what's the chance that it's going to descend into non-normal basketball, the isolation attack basketball, and then what happens in that situation?
I had something written down too, and I did talk about the, like you talk about solving the puzzle, and then if you think you've had, if you think you're smarter than the market, I guess at that point, or you've solved something, you see something, and the number is still anchored, and you make some attack points later in the series. But I often wonder too about like just the perception of a team after they've won a series and move on. And you end up in this next series, and you have that, like you keep saying, I think you invented a term. Just normal basketball. It's not really a great catchphrase, but like I get where you're going with it. But when you enter that next series and there's perception built around you from the previous one, I feel like sometimes you see some good angles. And I keep thinking about it. I've brought them up a couple times. I don't think it matters if it's the Timberwolves or the, a bunch of 18-year-old kids and the Thunder that get to play. Like the Nuggets should probably just beat the shit out of a team. And then the fact that they don't have like a bench isn't going to matter all that much against the 8th seed. And then you get this perception built in. Obviously everyone knows it's not like I'm saying the Nuggets are a bad team, but they just, every team has their flaws. Like, is there something to that early on in the series? If you see like just, hey, they played somebody who just, it was a shitty coach. He didn't make the right adjustments. He was never going to make the right adjustments. It wasn't the right team to make the adjustments. And even stepping into game one where they're more back to square one, playing normal basketball per se, is like, is there an advantage early in the series, or in a series price even?
Yeah, I think maybe the Nuggets in particular are quite interesting, where they are a great normal basketball team, or at least their top lineups are great normal basketball teams. Offensively, I think when it comes to isolation basketball, when it gets to like late series basketball, they'll be good too. I tried to look at, because post ups typically drop off when you get into the playoffs. It's hardly into the ball in the post. But the thing that I actually took away from it is not that really that post ups decrease so much. It's just that getting your best player the ball in the position that he likes the ball is what is going to increase. Like when you can't do all your other stuff, it just ends up being like Jokic gets a post catch, because like, okay, we need to get our best player the ball, and we need to try to pick a matchup that he's going to be able to take advantage of. It's again like same thing in the Boston series. They have to try to get Tatum the ball in an ISO. Like that's all they can really do. Looking at last year's data, the Nuggets went from 8% post frequency throughout the season to 14% in the playoffs. And that was because they just chucked it to the big fella every time. And like, yeah, they lost in 5 games, but their offensive efficiency was really good. And like, they were the only team that could score on the Warriors. And that's just because, they could still get Jokic the ball. So they're going to be really good at normal basketball. I think they're going to still be good at isolation basketball. The other end though is very different. Like, in terms of dealing with isolation stuff, defensively they may be not so good. Like, what's Kentavious Caldwell-Pope really good at? Chasing guys off screens. Like, is that as valuable in the playoffs? Like, even dumb guys know how to screen navigate in the playoffs. So his like defensive intelligence, getting over picks, not as valuable. Bruce Brown, similar thing. But those guys can also but Kentavious Caldwell-Pope can get picked on in the post. He can, if you have a strong guy, they might just go at him in the block. So he's going to probably be less valuable defensively. And then you have the flip side of that, like Michael Porter Jr., who's like, pretty dumb defensively, and can't get over a screen to save himself. Like he's just too tall and like too lanky.
Yep.
Like when he's super locked in and he knows the screen's coming, he might be quite good because he's long and he's not that quick. But if he's like able to get down in the stance to defend, he is a little bit better on the ball than what he's given credit for. So he's going to improve defensively. Caldwell-Pope, Brown, maybe are not so good defensively. Murray probably gets better defensively, and then Jokic gets way worse, obviously, because of attacking him in the ISO or in pick and roll is not so good. So I think on the Nuggets specifically, and this is kind of like a good way to talk through teams here, is that they're going to be good at normal basketball, probably quite good at isolation basketball offensively, but probably worse defensively in terms of isolation basketball.
Okay.
It kind of sounds like, and you're solving some of these puzzles or part of it ahead of time with like just what you said about like, here's my prognostications about how teams will be early series, mid series. It's almost like a chess game, mid game, late series, and like how the teams will be both sides of the ball, efficiencies, adjusting to the style of basketball and these matchups, and drawing it back to betting. Just in my brain now, it seems like totals would be very attackable if you can exploit this more so than sides or even series prices at this point. Then
I strongly agree with that sentiment in general. Like I think over the regular season, I think my action was 95% sides, and in the playoffs it's going to be 50-50 or 60-40 totals, I would guess, just in the blind. The points about the Nuggets are all super fair. Let's kind of hit a couple of these other teams because I'm curious to your thoughts if you agree or if you have a different read here. And I want to go back to the Suns to start with. So you were 100% correct. When it devolved into chaos basketball at the end of that Mavericks series, that team was cooked. There was obviously some other X factors, but it didn't matter. Like as soon as I think it was game 4, the refs really put their finger on the scale to make sure that was a longer series from recollection. And then as soon as that happened, I was like, oh Christ, like I was, cold, ice in the veins, like, oh shit, like, goosebumps, whatever. Like I'm in trouble. So I had a lot of Suns too, a lot of Suns, and a lot of Celtics last year. So it was not a great postseason for me. But the bigger problem even than the Mavericks were going to score into the 120s every time was their offense devolved into like working really hard to get Chris Paul a contested mid-range. And it was just like, you saw it and you're like, holy shit, this is what they're forced to do. Like, the other team, took Booker away to an extent. And it's like, oh my God, like we're really counting on this happening over and over and over again. This is super fragile. Well, now plan B is Kevin Durant, go get your shot. Like that's one of the most unstoppable playoff, offensive sets of my, professional watching basketball career. That feels like a pretty good plan B. And I think they're still susceptible defensively in chaos basketball in the late series, but I really don't know how you're stopping that team offensively in games 5, 6, 7. Is that a fair read?
I think that aligns with conventional wisdom and probably what I would say too. You think back to what Durant was able to do in Milwaukee when he was in Brooklyn, and then you try to contrast it with what happened last year against Boston, where Boston were able to be really, really physical and try to deny Durant any sort of position. And you've got to think that that's like the only way that you can combat Phoenix's like isolation attack. But the thing is if you do that, you still have 3 very capable offensive players on the floor. And if they are able to just go away from Durant a little bit, that offense is probably still going to be pretty good. Like if you have to sell out really hard to dealing with Durant, that offense is still going to be quite
Booker's
good. So
to crush you, right?
Like you can just like run, they can play normal-ish basketball if they're playing 4-on-4. So the hard thing is like, are they going to be playing 4-on-4? Like, is Josh Okogie going to be able to make enough shots? Like, or do you have to play like Landry, Shamet, and then you're pretty flammable defensively? Like if you have Shamet out there, Terrence Ross, like all of their other options are just like very, very flammable defensively. So like, can you deal with it? Hopefully, if you're Phoenix, you've got to hope that Okogie or Torrey Craig or one of these. Torrey Craig played New Zealand NBL, by the way, when I was coaching.
No way.
Yeah. So Torrey Craig, one of these options can actually play so that defensively you don't have like a whole bunch of picking spots because you know that guys are going to try and spread Chris Paul out, who is, a good regular season defender, but like in isolation and all. So
okay. That all sounds fair. Let's talk about one more West matchup because I feel like we might be on opposite sides of this one. Grizzlies Lakers is interesting in a lot of ways, and I know that I look at it as if this is a short series, it's because the Grizzlies are just that much better. They are that much more, just more complete and capable. And by the way, there's non-trivial injury risk that LeBron doesn't play, that AD doesn't play, that that this becomes a series of let's hope Austin Reeves can really get us through here. They're just way too fragile, and there's a realistic chance that just normal basketball Grizzlies win, in my opinion. And then if this devolves into a chaos kind of series, I look at the kind of this what people perceive as the strength of the Lakers, which is like a top 10 defense, and I think of it as a little bit Jekyll and Hyde, like against teams that don't have dynamic ways to attack you. That defense is very, very good. But if you have kind of multiple, avenues of mass, of max pain you can inflict, they can be beat. And I've seen it a bunch, even with their current iteration this season. And it's effectively what ran them out of the series against Phoenix a couple of years ago in the playoffs. And so, I look at the defense as a little bit, potentially exposable. And I look at the offense as super one-dimensional. Like, I don't really know what you do if plan A is not working. Am I anywhere close to the right track here? Or do you think that there's something specific about this version of the Lakers that makes them better than like 2 years ago that just got embarrassed by the Suns?
The hard thing is with the Lakers is defensively, you saw obviously what they could do to Minnesota when it became isolation basketball in the fourth quarter. A lot of that is Minnesota, but also a lot of that is Los Angeles. And they are really good at defending power guys. I think LeBron is like great at defending a power guy. Anthony Davis, great at defending a power guy. And like, if you don't have like the really big wing that can go at Dennis Schroeder, like he's probably the only spot you can pick at if you have a power guy. Like if you had Kawhi Leonard, like he's going to call up Dennis Schroeder every single time. Yeah. But then they can like have D'Angelo Russell defend, get out there as well. And he's better at defending power guys than he is at defending smaller, quick guys. Now, if you are playing Memphis, what do you have to deal with? You have to deal with Morant getting downhill.
Speed, yeah.
And so like Schroeder is quite good in that situation. Like Austin Reeves is like quite good at dealing with that. Like, but which you probably have to have Vanderbilt out there because if you have Hachimura has zero chance defending Ja Morant, and D'Angelo Russell has zero chance defending Ja Morant. So it means that you have to play Schroeder a lot, way less D'Lo, and way less Hachimura. And so like that just means that the Lakers offense is going to be terrible. If you have, no D'Lo, you have no, and you have to have Vanderbilt on the floor. Like it's hard to see the Lakers dealing with like a quick point of attack type guy whilst being able to keep enough offense on the floor to win. So I think like if you're trying to look at this through the lens of matchups beyond talent levels, then I think this is a pretty good one for Morant. I think the Lakers are an elite defense when it comes to, again, defending power guys and especially defending in isolations against power guys. They put so much length on the back line. That makes it really, really difficult. But in terms of defending like those jitterbug quick point guards, maybe they might struggle a little bit.
Okay. I got to tell you, Ham's not my guy either. A lot of games this year that he cost them and/or put games in jeopardy that they should have won relatively easily with a couple of decisions late in games. So just we'll see how he acquits himself, how he handles himself in the playoffs. I know one comeback win against the mighty Timberwolves, who never give relinquish leads ever.
You remember the playoff series last year?
Oh God,
it was the first year my daughter really became a basketball fan, and she just didn't understand like how often that happens. And maybe it doesn't happen that often, but like that whole series, she was just dying. She's like, we were just up by 25, Dad. I'm like, yeah, but we're going to do this apparently. And also, like, am I imagining things too? Like, how long ago was Westbrook like favorite for sixth man of the year?
Oh, it was a lot of the season.
Was that like Christmas? I mean, that wasn't even
no
long
into
ago.
January. Yeah,
It
into
feels
January.
like a fever. I had to think, I'm like, was that 2 years ago? It feels so long ago.
Yeah, it turns out betting Emmanuel quickly was not the way to make money in the six man market. It was being a ticket writer and writing minus 200 Westbrook tickets for sixth man of the year, because that was an absolutely ridiculous price. But anyone else in the West that you have strong opinions on one way or the other?
Not particularly, I don't think. I think the one other thing you want to touch on is, like, everyone thinks Denver's going to get worse because Jokic can't guard it and pick and roll, and when it gets to isolation basketball, he's going to really struggle. Which, like, yeah, that probably makes some sense. And I think, again, defensively, he's probably going to be worse in the playoffs than what he is in the regular season. But he's also going to play more minutes, playing more minutes is that might even outweigh just him being worse defensively. And so, like, it's impossible to describe how terrible this Nuggets bench is. Like, they are the worst bench of any good team ever, probably. Like, they're probably worse than the LeBron, Wade, Bosch, Heat bench. They're probably worse than like any of the Warriors. I mean, the Warriors probably.
Warriors bench was amazing. Okay. Yeah. Warriors bench was always good. Yeah.
Like, you're trying to think of these really shallow teams, and like, the team with one all-star, like, is that a shallow team? Like, but yeah, you look at this bench, and like, after you get to Bruce Brown, is there a single, like, would Evan Fournier be the seventh best player on this team? Like, there's not, like, maybe not Evan Fournier, but it'd be pretty close. Like, this team is so bad after you get past six, and like, Christian Brown can do some things that are like kind of valuable, but he can't shoot, and he can't like do much else other than guard the ball. And then, like, after you get past him, it is bleak. But that matters in the regular season. Doesn't matter that much in the playoffs, where you can like literally play six guys, where like, that Bucks versus Nets series, Bud played six guys the entire game for like the last 4 games of the series. So yeah, like, I think that effect of playing better players more minutes might outweigh the like regression from Jokic defensively. So we may be sleeping a little bit on the Nuggets.
Okay. I will also say,
do you think teams are that self-aware? Like, I don't even know what the Nuggets coach's name is, Drew.
Malone.
Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. Yeah. Do you think he's self-aware enough to realize like how historically bad the bench is?
Yes.
And like, well, and that's where I wonder, like, because we see this every year. It's like, and I joked about this with Noobs this morning. I'm like, a gentleman's sweep is, it's tongue in cheek, saying like, oh, we let him have a game because we're gentlemanly. No, it's like, hey, we let the foot off the gas because we're either looking ahead or it was a travel spot, and maybe we didn't play starters as much. Like, if you're the Nuggets, do you just put your foot down and grind someone to try to avoid 5 or 6 games in like the first 2 rounds? So you don't, I mean, playing a guy for like 44 minutes in, 4 games is probably better than 40 minutes in 5 or 6 games, just because like the freshness of getting to that next year is having like 3, 4, or 5 days off because you're waiting for other series to finish. Like, do you try to finish off teams like hard and fast if you're a team like this?
So Jokic is we know what he is in this environment with 44 minutes. He is a marathon man. He can fucking do it. He's the Cam Nori of the NBA. He wants to make the match longer for no reason at all. He wants to make it 5 sets, right? You think of what was it, 4 overtimes against the 4 overtimes against the Blazers. I think he played 60 minutes in that game, and literally you're like, what is Malone doing? He's going to kill this guy. Like, he doesn't look like he's in great shape, but for whatever reason, he's got endurance to go long and strong. And I would say you don't really have to worry about, kind of tread on the tires unless he's dealing with more of an injury than we realize, which is possible. Yeah, I think, I think the point is fair. You give him more minutes, he's going to be fine. And in general, that makes your overall team rating like substantially better because you're not playing the other guys. That said, Jamal Murray, not the same guy that was in the bubble that was super dynamic as a Robin to Jokic's Batman. And, I think realistically, if the Nuggets realize any potential, it's Murray looks like bubble Murray and not like, what he has looked like for long stretches of this regular season. So tough to say, but Suns, I think Suns Nuggets, you agree, is second round matchup? We're gonna send the Clippers packing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Almost certainly. It's like probably like 93% for the Nuggets, and then 85% for the
So best advice we can give you is watch all of the Nuggets round one series, watch all the Suns round one series, and just get a feel for what those teams are doing when the going gets tough, what's working, what's not, because that second round Suns Nuggets is going the distance. I don't think any of us would be surprised if that goes 4. Suns Nuggets was a sweep 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
You remember?
Yeah, sweep. And
that was the Suns in 4. Yeah.
Chris Paul just like absolutely killed Jokic in drop coverage. But the thing is like since then, so one of the things, Nekias Duncan, who's like one of the good low post guests from this year, he said a thing about Jokic where like Jokic is not a bad defender, he's just a very limited one. And like it's like if you play him in drop coverage, he's like, I think from the article that I read, it was something like they defended like a 24th best at defending pick and roll in the NBA. If he plays up at the level of the ball, it's like top 5. And like the other thing with Jokic is like people think that he's not the type of player to have like an on-off switch, but he's so limited athletically that I think that he has to be at full go. Otherwise, they just like stink. And so like I think there's something to them having the best defensive rating in the club's the last 2 years, because when he is full go, then and like the other players are like trying so hard to help him, like they're actually like a pretty good defensive unit. So yeah, like again, I do think they're going to get worse in the playoffs defensively, but there are scenarios for sure that are actually fine on defense, because Jokic is just like a lot better than what people think he is. And then just the one last point on the Nuggets, we've done a lot of Nuggets chat, but people don't realize too is that every time Jokic touches the ball, it's like 1.2 points per possession. Like it just does not matter who it is. Like Ayton's probably like one of the best post defenders in the league. Doesn't matter. Like you give that dude the ball, worst case scenario, he takes a 55% floater. It's kind of like Durant, right? Like, Durant's going to get a pretty good shot. Jokic is going to get an even better shot. Like he's going to hit Aaron Gordon at the rim for a dunk. He's going to hit Michael Porter Jr. for a 3, or he's going to take a 55% floater and then probably get the offensive rebound like 15% of the time. So it just like every time he catches the ball, it's like an amazing position. Absolutely amazing position.
I love that point. And just to kind of close the loop on 4 overtime Jokic, he played 64 minutes in that game, turned around the next game, and they lost. They turned around the next game.
In my side just hearing that.
He comes out the next game and he had a 38 minutes on the floor, triple double. He was the player of the game clearly, and kept the Nuggets in that series. Ultimately, they did not win because Game 7 was a rock fight, and they lost the rock fight. That was one where I think the total closed in the 215 range, and 196 points were scored in that Game 7. So this is something just to keep in the back of your head. And I think we've kind of colored in the lines enough about why this happens that we can move on a little bit. Anything interest you in the Eastern Conference, or are you mostly geared up to watch the West?
Or just your like betting strategy in general? Like how do you think staking should be employed going forward? Like
game by game, series by series, a little bit of everything.
Is it small? If you have an opinion, if you think the market's wrong, like it's like shit. It's still early. We haven't seen the adjustments. The chess match hasn't started. Like it should be smaller entry points early and bigger once we know, or heavier on series prices based on this, that, or the other thing. Like how does the strategy get employed here? This for 2 months. These playoffs take forever. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think like you need to think about the efficiency of the market from to some extent. Like the game by game market is obviously going to be more efficient than the futures market at this point. And so, at any point really, like just there's more money traded in the game to game market. So, if you're looking to leverage a position, you're trying to do it in the least efficient market possible. Like that's kind of my betting strategy in every area, like the NBA. takes up a very small percentage of my betting turnover, whereas like really shitty markets take up a huge percentage of my betting turnover. And so, the thing is that, if you're right, you're obviously going to get paid a lot because you can bet as much as you want into some of these games.
Yep.
I mean, really any of these games. And so, can you, if you have some relatively strong conviction, and you also can you need to figure out like the best way to bet it, obviously. Often the game-to-game prices won't be perfectly correlated with the series prices, because of how things will like progress over time, and like some people can predict those better than others, but then B, just because like futures prices don't move with the market 100% of the time, right? So like you have some chance of picking off something that is not correlated with the game one move or anything like that. I think there are some like traps to watch out for though, like the Sacramento Warriors series and the game one price is not like all that in line with what you would expect given the game one prices. And I think some of that is potentially the narrative that the Warriors are harder to play in game one than almost any other team because they play so different to everybody else. And that's like something that Zach Lowe talks about all the time. Like I've never tested it myself. Like I don't know if there's actual credence to this theory, but another good example of like a price being, I thought was really wrong, was game one when they went into Memphis and Memphis were like +2 or something. And you're like, oh wait, like market ratings say that this should be like -2. Yes. Like this is ridiculous. And so I think possibly someone influential out there thinks that the Warriors are better in game one than what the rest of the market does. This is the future.
That's kind of the cherry on top too, because
should have won that fucking game. Yeah.
The question, because the question is the relationship between the futures price, whether it's the series price or maybe even to win the conference or the whole thing, and the game by game stuff. Like you said, there's not a perfect correlation. Not only because they're individual markets and they might have liabilities, long-term liabilities one way or the other, but like sometimes there's just such asymmetrical outcomes on certain games, especially early in the series. Then you said it. I was going to say it. You nailed it perfectly. It's like, but if we get to game time and that still exists, like somebody believes in it and it's somebody with money, and you kind of have to respect that at that point.
Some of it though is just market is anchored, right? Like, the game 7 Trailblazers, Trailblazers and Nuggets, like that should have probably been 205 or 204, and it's got stuck in the teens because the game 1 was like.
And that's fair. I'm talking more. Early series. I think late series that obviously
that's
changes.
fair. That's fair.
Once you have the information, you've learned a lot. The market's learned a lot. But early series, like if something is, severely skewed in that relationship, is it always just somebody is backing that with cash?
Yeah. Let me kind of pitch an early series question then and see if you guys agree or disagree. So if I come up with a fair price for Nets at Sixers, it's not 8.5. It's a lot lower than that. And that's sort of a traditional basketball viewpoint. And if you sim out what is the 7-game series, if this is a fair between these two teams, I am nowhere close to Sixers -1,000 being a fair price for that series. Does that mean that, and I'm not, I guess I should look at the other side of the coin. I'm nowhere close to Nets +700 being fair. Did I bet that? No. I don't think that's a very good bet because I could see end of game sort of, kind of crunch time playing out quite poorly for the Nets. And the situation arises where, these games are competitive. They're covering big numbers like that, but they lose in 5. Like that wouldn't shock me at all. They could lose in 4. It wouldn't shock me at all. Like the Sixers are just that much better when it comes to crunch time and the Nets don't have an ISO answer really at all. Like if that's final 2-minute basketball, like that's probably not going to score unless they get, there's just somebody just, guts up and makes a shot. But, it's so basically, I think better off, even though I have a bigger edge by the numbers on Nets series 7 plus 700. Like it's way, way more advantageous to take on Nets plus 8.5, in my opinion, in game 1 and go back to the well in game 2. And then, they're going to be small dogs at home in game 3, take them in that spot. Like, I think I'm probably just going to end up betting Nets game by game under the assumption that it's going to be a short series. The Sixers are going to dominate in crunch time. But at the same time, it shouldn't be an 8.5 point spread. You have any kind of read on if this is a realizable strategy? Am I thinking on the right track, or am I ultimately going to get fed my lunch by MVP?
I think you're in your own head, man.
You've
thought yourself in a circle.
I think like that follows the logic that we've been talking about, is that there are two possible game states, and yeah, like if they're going to play real basketball, if the two teams are going to play real basketball, then yeah, like maybe the Nets are a pretty good bet. Like, but once it becomes not real basketball, then good luck to the Nets' offensive rating in isolation is going to be pretty bad. So yeah, like once it devolves down to that, and it has to devolve down to that, like Doc Rivers sometimes makes or misses adjustments. Sometimes he plays the wrong players. But like the other thing I think, just sorry to deviate again, the other thing I think about this, and like I kind of don't know how they fucked it up last year, but they also have Daryl Morey in the front office and some really smart people. Like they make the coaching adjustments. The difference between the playoffs and the regular season, I actually think coaching matters. The individual coach matters less in the playoffs than in the regular season. And it's because it's the coach and it's the front office who are doing all the scouting and feeding the the like what they should be doing with the lineups and who they should be attacking and what they should be doing. It's not always just the coach. The coach just has to implement the game plan. Whereas in the regular season, the coach is coming up with the game plan. Daryl Morey is scouting somebody, and he's at the slot.
You'd never sit down with the whole team and be like, all right, we gotta break this down and really figure this out for when we play the Hornets again in 3 months.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I know. I took something entirely different away from that. I took away from that Daryl Morey should bear more of the scrutiny for Houston and Philadelphia struggling in the playoffs than James Harden should, because this should be scouting a little better here, buddy. What's going on?
Just more like he definitely needs. He needs to bear some of the blame for DeAndre Jordan playing over Paul Reed or whatever. Rivers it's important that Rivers makes these decisions, but like Daryl Morey can also tell Doc Rivers to like get fucked and not play him. He's his boss. Like it always comes down to the boss. And like these dudes, these like front office dudes are so smart and they think about so many things, even more so than the coach, because the coach has to think about a whole bunch of other things. And so like when you have the organization, it's the whole thing is looking at this one problem. They're going to figure out the answer to the problem. Whereas like if you just have the coach figuring out the answer to the problem, the smart ones figure it out and the dumb ones don't figure it out. Yeah. And so that's why I think in the regular season, it's kind of more important that the coach.
Okay. Am I being crazy to say that the Sixers front office is going to look at this series and be like, okay, let's not fire many of our bullets. Let's get into the end of the game with one possession, and then we'll just win. Like if I was trying to get out with the least amount of pain possible, least amount of again, exact opposite feeling about Embiid, logging minutes in playoff series. Like the physicality does seem to impact him, and he picks up nagging injuries that he carries into next future rounds. And I would put him in as much bubble wrap as possible, and cut open the bubble wrap with 2 minutes to go down 2, and then win and get out of there. But I don't know. Also, by the way, I think Harden's not right, but maybe that's just me.
I think he's probably a little sore too. But like, what do you need to do? All you need to do is like run. You need to like do a pick and roll and take 2 dribbles and then chuck it to Embiid at the free throw line. Once he catches it there, it's game over because Claxton is too small. So and this is another thing where when you have really, really good players, then the other team, it forces the other team to not just be like, oh, this guy's a good defender or he's a bad defender. It's this guy's a good defender against speed guys. This guy's a good defender against power guys. This guy's a good help defender. This guy's a good on-ball defender. Whatever. And like with Embiid, yeah, Claxton is probably like maybe like a top 5 defensive player in the entire league across the regular season. Like, is he a top 5 player defending Joel Embiid? Absolutely not. No chance.
Who's number one defending Embiid?
Probably, yeah, Ayton maybe.
Ayton.
Ayton is so strong in the post.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's a really good call, actually.
And like Brook Lopez gets like munched by Embiid. Like they're just so, I just don't think that Claxton's going to be able to do all that much against them.
Okay, interesting. Any controversial opinion here. Not a Donovan Mitchell playoff guy. Knicks aren't very good. Like they're not as good as their record. They're not as good as like being any kind of a veiled threat to win the East.
Do you remember that 2-week stretch though, where Knicks fans were insufferable?
Oh, surely, yeah, for sure.
God. It's fun. It's like when the Mets win the championship in April.
Thibodeau's got some tricks up his sleeve. He's got some, he's been around the block a couple times. This is relatively new.
Award market fuckery. Jesus.
No, I think there's a case for the Knicks solving the Cavs over the balance of the early part of this series and making this longer than it has to be, and maybe even stealing it. Some of this is kind of postulating that Randall gets healthier as the series goes along, and some of this is postulating that Thibodeau realizes he's got to get Barrett the hell out of there as the series goes along. And I just think that if you have a closing 5 in games 5, 6, and 7, that doesn't include Barrett and does include a healthy-ish Brunson, Randall, and quickly, like the Knicks look live to me over the balance of this series. They may not cover game 1, game 2, just because standard basketball would tell you the Cavs should win those games.
Well, do you still fuck with those markets though, Drew? I mean, the limits and liquidity are going to be shit compared to everything else, but we used to have a lot of fun with these.
Oh, sure.
Over 5.5 games, over 6.5 games.
For sure. Well, no, I think
those are fun markets to attack.
I think you let the Knicks get their brains beaten in games 1 and game 2, and then you come in on some ridiculous prices for the Knicks to come back and win that series. I don't know. You have a read on how those teams match up?
Yeah, I don't have a super strong opinion here. I don't know whether Donovan Mitchell isn't so good in the playoffs. Offensively, he's been incredible.
Surely,
playoff series, sure. and the teams have produced really well offensively with him. The other thing I think is if you're going to trap Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley is kind of the perfect guy to be your release valve. Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland's ability to pull up 3-pointers is what unlocks Evan Mobley as an offensive player. He's not that good of an offensive player if he, has to just fill in the gaps and be a 4-man who kind of shoots threes and stuff. He's kind of bad at those things. But if he catches the ball on the short roll, he's got amazing feel. He's a good 1-dribble play, can finish at the rim from there. He's really good. The other thing is that on the other end, I think talking about Randall, Evan Mobley's built in a lab to defend Julius Randall. Julius Randall's strong and stronger than Mobley, so might knock him back a bit, but really struggles with length. And the other thing, he's a bit of a bum slayer to me. If Randall can't get on the rim, then he is just going to take these step back mid ranges, and that's not gonna work. So I think from a matchup perspective, I think Cleveland's going to roll there. Cleveland is the analytic darling, the team hiding in plain sight from a net rating perspective. The other thing is that Evan Mobley should have won Defensive Player of the Year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He leads the league in defensive RAPM, and the reason why he's not going to win is because A, he's on Cleveland, so no one really cares, but B, his defensive EPM is bad because randomly defensive EPM doesn't adjust for 3-point shooting luck, and teams shot 39% with him on the floor and 32% on the bench. So yeah, I think Cleveland are going to roll in that series personally.
Okay, so I remember pretty clearly a handful of games that really mattered for Cleveland this year in the regular season. Maybe the best example was right after the All-Star break. They played the Nuggets, and they were the better team that day. They were all the advantages you thought they would have. They had them, and it didn't matter. Like when the going got tough, those guys just wilted. And I don't know what it is about Mitchell, but I've lost a lot of money on him in the playoffs when they absolutely were the better team. Like the bubble Jazz against the Nuggets series. I'm still like the all of the games they lost in that series. It was like, how did this happen? And there's just too much of that on his resume of like, how did you lose this? Last year's Jazz against the Mavericks, like Luka didn't play half of those games or any of those games. I don't even remember, but like there's just a lot of like, I don't get why they don't show up at certain key times, and a lot of inexperience, really, that has me concerned about that Cavs team. So I don't have any pre-flop series anything. I agree with the current. Actually, I think I didn't realize it was a 5.5 point spread. I think that should actually be a little bit bigger for game one if this is just a routine basketball handicap. But I don't know, something about them kind of spooks me. And all your points are fair, but
I think the thing about Donovan Mitchell is he's been bad on defense in the playoffs. He's been really good on offense, and the Jazz have stunk on defense. They were just bad on defense basically every single year, and like a lot of that is actually on Donovan Mitchell. But Donovan Mitchell's been quite good on defense this year, and he sat down in a stance and like he went on some. I think JJ Redick maybe one time, and he said that all he did in the offseason was do closeouts. And like that's all he did in the offseason was just like, okay, I'm just gonna like work on closeouts. And I think defensively, he's going to be somebody who's going to take it a lot more seriously this year. And so I don't think that they're going to combust on defense. And so that's kind of why I think offensively he's been really, really good basically every playoff series. So yeah, if he can guard, he should be pretty okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the exact sort of scenario of last year's play-in disaster for them too.
For Cleveland, they were just like, they were banged up and like they were a terrible team. I have no idea how they won so many games. Really, like the first part of the season when they had Darius Garland and Colin Sexton. Well, no, Sexton played like a tiny little bit, but when they had Garland on the floor, they were like pretty good because they had somebody who could dribble. Garland went out for a bit there, and they like panic traded for Rajon Rondo. It was because so Rubio and Garland were both healthy at the start of the season. They won a bunch of games at the start of the season, and then once they didn't have anybody who could dribble, they were terrible. And then Jared Allen got injured, and so their defense was terrible because Evan Mobley was too skinny to play center. So I think like last season is like not a great way to look at the Cavs. I think, I do think that the Cavs are kind of a bit of a sleeper. Like, you know, can you really see them beating Milwaukee? Probably not. But like, they have 4 like fucking good basketball players, and then they suck after that.
Okay. The other thing about them in this, and we'll move on, but like they were so underwhelming on the road this year. Bickerstaff, I like, but I worry about him as a playoff coach for whatever reason. The organization overall, I don't know if he's got the support he needs to problem solve, puzzle solve, whatever over a playoff series. So yeah, I'm buyer beware on Cleveland.
Who's buying Cleveland? Like
a lot of people buying Cleveland.
I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
A lot of people are trying to. Yeah.
They steamed a ton in that series.
I get this. I get the series, I guess. I thought you meant for the East. Like,
no, people with sincere opinions would say Tier 2 is Philly, Cleveland level after Tier 1, and they're not.
And like I don't buy that really, but like, you know, would I be like absolutely stunned if Cleveland didn't make the conference finals? Like,
I'm gonna have to do.
I suppose like depends how like much work absolutely is.
Would you be more surprised if Philly beat Boston or Cleveland beat Milwaukee? Because I'd be more surprised if Philly beat Boston.
No, I'm the other way for sure.
Okay.
I think
No,
yeah,
the Bucks,
I think
the Bucks.
Sorry, you go.
Why are we shooting?
Do you trust the Bucks?
The Bucks are interesting in that they haven't had really like, have they ever had an amazing playoffs? Like, they beat some pretty bad teams on their way to winning the title,
Sure.
and like, yeah, they like rolled over Phoenix in the finals, but Phoenix like, were they that good?
It was game 5 was very much in the balance. If that goes the other way, that's probably Phoenix in 6.
Yeah, and the thing about Milwaukee is like, can the thing that a lot of people say is like transition basketball is not as valuable in the playoffs, and like the study that I was doing today is that transition frequency doesn't actually go down really at all, and transition effectiveness doesn't really go down at all. But the final 4 teams, Golden State, Boston, Dallas, and Miami, they all basically barely ever got out in transition in the playoffs last year. So like maybe at the highest levels, it matters a lot, matters some more. Like, does it matter where Giannis is just going to kill again, the Bulls or the Heat in transition? Like they don't know how to wall up against them. Like the one take I have with the Bucks.
Well, I mean, what drives that? Now that's bothering my brain a lot. Like what drives the lack of transition? Like if you get, it feels like if the
transition defense is somewhat effort based, from what I can tell.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm asking. It's not what
attention to detail is really. Yeah. Attention to detail is really, really important, I think, in defensive transition. Like the thing with the Bucks, and this is kind of similar to the Warriors, and it's kind of strange because the Warriors are so finesse and the Bucks are so powerful, like led by their best players, right? Like you've got the most athletic player in the NBA and you have the most skillful player in the NBA. They drive, but they are amazing at taking advantage of one mistake. If you like screw up a Curry screen, like a back screen, and he gets a naked 3-pointer, like that's an 85% effective field goal shot. Yeah. If you screw up a Giannis coverage in like transition, or he catches the ball in the block against somebody who can't guard him, that's an 85% effective field goal percentage shot, right? But then also, like, if you guard Curry perfectly, he can't get that good of a shot because he doesn't really have like a knock you back mid-range game, like probably can't drive guys on the rim. Same thing with Giannis. Like if you have a guy who can stonewall him, like what they end up doing is he just like sprays it for a 3-pointer, and someone else like shoots a contested 3. And so like the difference between good defenses against the Bucks and bad defenses against the Bucks has like a way wider impact, and it's the same thing with the Warriors. I think if you perfectly defend the Warriors, they can't really score that much, but if you screw it up, in the amount of times that you do screw it up, then it's like absolutely deadly. And so like the perfect opposite of that is like Kevin Durant is going to get a 60% mid-range jumper no matter who you put on him and no matter how you defend it. And like, if you take away his rim shots, like cool, he's still, even if you have PJ Tucker, he's going to take 45%, right? Like the difference between his is like 45% to 60%, whereas the difference between Giannis is like 30% to 80%. So the Bucks look really dumb if you defend them perfectly. It's like, what the hell are they doing? But every time you screw it up, they score. So I think they are kind of like bum slayers a little bit, and I think at the highest levels, I think Boston are going to beat. I think Boston.
You can say boomer bust. They're boomer bust.
Yeah. For sure. Well, it's funny too. Like you answered it an hour ago. The defensive effort, and a team that I hate to say like a team relies on transition offense because you can't. That would be wild if it was like, hey, that's how we win games. But a team that's more
early Giannis Bucks.
Well, I mean, a team that's more reliant on it than an average team. It's just like, it's so stupid to think about it because it's so simple. Like, oh yeah, effort kills that. Like whatever the series. Well, it was the big series, like the block, LeBron's block. Yeah. That everyone like that doesn't happen in December. It's just like people are. Well, you're not running back with that sort of effort, and like just like you said, the attention to details to not allow those sort of transition opportunities. It's just going to not exist. Now I'm all out on Milwaukee. Fuck.
Well, the Bucks lost to the Heat in the bubble because they had an Achilles heel defending the 3 that year, all year long. Everybody knew it. No one, and it just never got exploited until that series. And the Heat literally were like, attention to detail and transition. We're going to make those baskets harder for you. And the Bucks literally had no plan B. It was like, what? It was like, that series melted my brain.
Well, that's the thing. Like, those coaches look so stupid, right? Because everything that's worked all year is like, oh, you know what? Like Brook Lopez, if you have him in drop coverage and the guy tries to take Brook Lopez again, like it's a 40%, less than 40% shot. Whereas like if Tyler Hero comes off an Adebayo handoff and Adebayo nails you on the screen, like Hero's naked for a 3-pointer. It's like 65% effective field goal. So they're like boom or bust on defense when they were playing drops as well. And so that like, it makes you look like really stupid. And then when you score, you're like, oh, the other team just screwed up. Like, oh yeah, but like Bud probably put them in a pretty good position to be able to score there. So I think like Milwaukee, at least previously, were that ultimate boom or bust team. Now they're a little bit different defensively. They have Lopez guarding up a little bit higher on the floor. They switch a little bit more now. And then on offense, they mix in a lot more Drew, Giannis, or Middleton, Giannis pick and roll, where like that can kind of beat even good defenses a little bit because Giannis is catching the ball closer to the basket and he can get like a better shot. So they've become like less boom or bust, but still I think against the best defenses, they're going to struggle to score. And then against like really good offenses that can bring Lopez quite high out on the floor. And Horford is like a kind of Lopez killer. Horford is probably like pretty good against him. You know, like any Boston or Golden State or series like that, I think is gonna be pretty difficult for Milwaukee.
Okay, is Drew Holiday one of the last underrated players in the NBA?
I actually used to think he was a little bit overrated. That like it kind of didn't show up in the in the plus minus defensively. Like he's amazing at guarding the ball, and like he's a guy in the playoffs that's like more valuable because of his ability to guard multiple positions. But he's not someone who like is an amazing help defender. So I think like he's now properly rated. I think his defense is actually like his offense has gotten way better recently. He's like still makes like all these dumb decisions, but he's gotten way better offensively. And then the final piece about the Bucks is that they have a lot of different pieces that they can put out there, but like, is Javon Carter going to play instead of Grayson Allen or whoever? Like their offense is quite good with Grayson Allen's out there, but then like if it's not Grayson Allen, then who is it going to be alongside Lopez or like really their big four, like Lopez, Giannis, Middleton, and Holiday. Oh, I suppose Pat Connaughton is the guy that's like really important there.
You want me to kind of blow some? So I did this experiment because I was curious for the Lauri Markkanen SGA most improved discussion. Like just one all in stat in Darko, which I hold high regard. Markkanen went from like 0 to a 2 point something, which was that's an enormous leap. SGA went from like 2 to 3 or whatever. Like, you know, it was pretty clearly Markkanen. And I was like, I wonder if there's anyone else that you don't really think about that had a huge leap this year. Drew Holiday went from like 3 to almost 5. And 5, as far as Darko goes, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're like in rare air there. And he only got 3 votes so far for second team All NBA, 4 votes for fourth team All NBA. Like he's probably not going to make an All NBA team. Like that's kind of wild to me.
I haven't kept up with most improved. Who's winning that right now in the
Markkanen, but it's very few votes counted, so it's tough to say.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty done. I think Markkanen's going to.
Oh, he's up 13 to 2.
yeah, it's pretty.
It's only 15 out of 100, but that's a big.
It's like getting the early returns from like New Hampshire or whatever in the presidential election.
But it's what it indicates about the rest of the votes is that those 13 are probably. I mean, the 15 are probably pretty predictive. The thing about Drew being a massive improver this year, you can see a lot of that comes offensively, and like a lot of that is because he's handling the ball in pick and roll rather than Middleton, and so like that diversifies their offense. They get to do more pick and roll, but like when it's bread and butter time, he's probably not going to be handling the ball. Like if Middleton's healthy, Middleton's probably going to be the guy handling the ball. So like is is this improvement this year actually going to be sustainable because he's going to be playing a different role?
No. Basically, him and Chris split, and
exactly.
They diverged. But in terms of DPM right now, Drew Holiday is like 5th, 6th in the league. That's unbelievable. Anyway, Boston Celtics. Let's end here.
I thought we could go the whole time without.
No, we got to talk about the Celtics. You, as a Celtics supporter, I see you wearing your Marcus Smart shirt, and you got the the Celtics on the wall there. Something about the vibe with this team this year doesn't feel great. I gotta say, I don't love the way that Missoula has sort of been exposed as a coach down the stretch, but at the same time, like, they kind of proved what they needed to prove earlier in the season and then just coasted, and so they should be more rested. They should be more playoff, just have more bullets in the chamber for the playoffs. What is your read on the vibe of the Celtics, and do you think we're going to get to, say, mid-May and people are going to be like, holy crap, this is an all-time team, and crown them already?
They have like an absolutely sick team. When you look at it, like Malcolm Brogdon being the 7th best player on the team is like, oh my God, that is absurd. That's the amount of talent that they have is crazy. But like, I think the main thing that it boils down to is like, is Jason Tatum like really that good of an isolation scorer against, like, who can he pick at, and like, is that going to be a viable enough strategy in like the last 2 rounds of the playoffs? Jason Tatum trying to score in isolation against the other team's worst defender. I don't think he's added that much from that perspective this year, and so like that definitely worries me. I still think their crunch time offense is like quite concerning. Defensively, I think they're going to be like amazing. I think they require the other team to have some picking spots, and like we saw with the Warriors last year, if you can put 4 good defenders and 1 like passable defender out on the floor, I think they're going to really struggle in isolation. If you can only put 3 and there are 2 picking spots, then they're probably going to be okay. That's probably the main thing, I think, for the Celtics is who they face. Playing normal basketball, the best team in the league, and it's not close, I think. Well, maybe not close is a little bit of a stretch, but I think playing normal basketball, they should be at least a 1.5 point favorite on a neutral against everybody.
Okay, the data from the regular season would tell you this is now like rare air offensive team combined with, we know at full strength they are a defensive nightmare. I mean, the ISO stuff about Tatum is a very fair criticism. I will also say that when he's a hot hand guy, he's a little streaky, and when it's going in, like, I could see very, very clear one outcome of these playoffs is literally like, by the time we get to the finals, the market's like, okay, this is no one stands a chance
what's
against
this finals
these guys.
MVP price?
It's a good question. Is
that market up?
Yeah,
sure.
I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it because nobody will shut the fuck up about the awards markets yet. So, like, Bobby Portis got a 6-man vote. That's a thing.
He did.
He got a first place vote from Ash.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's
He's got his finger on the pulse of the NBA. I don't know if you knew that. What as you step back and give us just synthesize everything we've talked about. What are we going to be? What are going to be the narratives come mid-June?
I think the Nuggets are going to be better than what people think that they are, and so Jokic is going to be a little bit vindicated come that. But then I think Boston are going to be the team out of the East who are really good. But then there's also the scenario that like Phoenix walked to the title too, and it's like, oh my God, yeah, of course they were the best team. They have like
you just got to wonder though, like at what point Chris Paul's decomposing corpse holds them back, because
the West has a lot of like, what if Anthony Edwards, Anthony Davis heads to the locker room first quarter, game 1, like and then Chris Paul too. There's so many people that are just going to get injured. I might just. Yeah. I'm still going.
Well, Chris Paul doesn't need to be. Chris Paul is just playing at a pretty poor level.
Well, he's also due for an injury. It's been blowing it
The
out.
other thing is that his backups suck. So like Chris Paul
right.
might not be that good anymore, but like he's still like better.
He's got to be out there. Yeah.
Yeah, like the other dudes who have to play. So like, yeah, they betting on Phoenix is, you talk about like picking up pennies in front of a steamroller. Like, yeah, like the payout's a lot better than these minus 1,000 shots or whatever that we're consistently talking about. But like, you have to dodge a lot of injury risk with Phoenix. Phoenix is maybe possibly the most injury prone contender of like the last while. Definitely the most injury prone favorite that we can think about in the last few years.
That's a fair point.
I put my final four together then, Drew.
What do you got? Cleveland,
Philly, Denver, LA. And by Denver, LA, I mean Denver Lakers. Oh, you couldn't have Denver Clippers, I guess. I think I'm most jacked. Like, I just hope something fucking stupid doesn't happen. Like, I want Sixers Celtics. I want to watch that. I want that to go 7. I think maybe that's my only wish. I don't have any hope for my real futures. I told Noops this too. I have some futures on like the Hawks and from like preseason for some reason at a big number. I feel like there was some like Durant rumors or something that gave me. I ended up. Was there a Durant rumor to Dallas at some point preseason? So then I had a bunch of like I put them in different times too. So it was the buttons with the cash out button. So then I had all these Dallas futures. So when they got Kyrie, they actually got equity. Like you could, it was like $1.09 on the dollar. And I asked somebody, I'm like, I should just cash this out now, right? He's like, yeah, you're getting your money back. Like, please do this. So I guess I'm glad that happened. But otherwise, I'm just cheering for the Hawks, I guess, if I want cash. Doesn't seem like a good way to financial freedom.
I wouldn't say so.
Are you sitting on any futures? We didn't really talk about that, Drew.
I
asked Shipper. I don't.
I got some Nuggets and some Celtics at like what is
like those are good.
Market price. Yeah, but like they could win, but like they're certainly not. I wouldn't. Would I make them again right now? It's like maybe. I don't feel amazing about them.
Well, I mean, but if they're better prices than current, you could be a little happy.
No, they're about where like the Celtics price is better than what it currently is, and the Nuggets price is worse. So we'll see.
I got some Grizz.
Grizz is good.
Yeah, I got some Grizz at some good numbers.
I did have some Lakers too when it was like Kyrie might go to the Lakers because I thought in my head I'm like that's like the one motherfucker who could like lock down Kyrie's crazy and make him good. So I bet some Lakers at like 30 or something. That's not great.
I got Grizz to win the West, which has got some equity, not a lot. And then my strategy all along was just to wait and try to get the best price on Celtics because I kind of thought a swoon was coming down the stretch, and then I never played it because the market consensus around Milwaukee being amazing solidified so solidly that I think you're probably going to get a good price on Celtics in that series. And I did the math of Philly Milwaukee series rollover, and it's going to be better than the current number or any number you could have gotten all season basically on the Celtics. So I think I'm just going to.
Who do you think's the best team still in like in the NBA? Guns to the head, like one team. Who do you think's the best?
Celtics.
Yeah, I think it's the Celtics too.
I have Celtics 1, and then I have a Celtics 1, and then I have a whole mess of teams kind of in the who's second best.
I think Phoenix is the only. Well, I mean Milwaukee you could potentially say, but I think Phoenix is the only other team you could potentially say is
could be better
than the Celtics right now.
Yeah. The injury risk is scary with them for sure. And Chris Paul, just in general, not being an effective playoff player this year is very scary for them. But it may not matter. Like he might not have to have much of a role. So.
Fuck it, I'll be a Celtics fan. I need to have a future that has a chance. I just hate that whole city. The roads are too skinny. The tunnels are dumb. There's a bay right in the middle of it. Food was good.
What's the current number on the Celtics?
It doesn't matter. Price doesn't matter if they win.
322. Yeah.
322 for what?
Bucks being shorter than the Celtics in the futures market is kind of crazy to me. I have the Bucks closer to my fair on them is closer to 5-1.
Well, isn't that
and they're
just
plus
That's
285.
just
that's a
the
product
that's
of
just
having Philly
the
on their side, isn't it?
Yeah. That's
it's
it.
path.
Like, yeah, the Celtics are probably better than Milwaukee, but the path is quite a bit harder.
Yeah, my series fair for Celtics Bucks is going to have Celtics favored, and almost certainly they'll open dogs, unless something crazy happens. I would guess.
Yeah,
right?
that would seem to. Yeah. I don't know. I could see the Celtics being favorite. Like, especially given that they have to go through Philly to get there. Their rating can increase like relatively largely. So yeah, I could see the Celtics opening favorite in that series. Yeah.
I will tell you this: last year, injuries, fatigue, all that stuff in the playoffs tended to, I thought, diluted and kind of made the playoff product a little worse. The West especially was not especially, it wasn't very fun last year. The fact that we went through the regular season this year and there was such an emphasis on lightening the load on these guys should create a really, really good product. So I think that kind of being a little concerned about injuries and stuff may not ultimately matter much. Like, we could see some, the good teams kind of just get through, be healthy, and really impress.
Yeah. How many good series are you like truly excited for? Nuggets, Suns.
Nuggets, Suns is big.
I was
Bucks,
gonna say I named one. There's probably one in
Bucks,
the West.
Celtics is.
I don't know if the Lakers just keep it up and like Davis is good, on both ends, and he's not hurt. Like Lakers with a deep run. Those are fun series no matter what.
Yeah.
Lakers Memphis is like by far the best first round, or by far the most interesting first round series. I think.
Yeah. I don't know that I'm starting to accumulate quite the little Grizzlies position here against the Lakers, because I'm not anywhere close to this current market still.
Which I think is I think that's the right opinion. But yeah, like, would I be stunned if the Lakers win? No, absolutely not.
No. The longer it goes in the series, the less great I'm going to feel, surely, because I think there's a big chunk of outcomes where Grizz win relatively easily.
Yeah,
if that doesn't happen, then I'm going to be like, okay, now I need some coin flips to go my way. It's not going to feel great. But the as great and as entertaining as a Suns Nuggets series is going to be, I don't know that I'm going to bet a lot of it, right? So there's kind of a split here where it's like the best series might end up being like the ones where, they aren't actually that entertaining, but I just feel like there's a huge edge. Like the best series last year in the playoffs was Celtics over the Nets. Like, that was fucking awesome. Like, the rest of the playoffs after that was, things went sideways on me, so I didn't really enjoy them. But
Heat Philly, knowing it that Embiid had broke his face was pretty.
That was pretty incredible. Yeah, that was pretty incredible. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. All right, well, let's wrap up here. Great job. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. And best luck in the playoffs. If people want to track you down on the old twitter.com machine and be entertained by your
Coke can.
Yeah.
Hopefully I won't hurl any abuse at anybody.
Of course. And if you come across any Rorts, slide them into the DMs. We're all about the Rort shopping. So the rest of the summer is going to be interesting, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll after we log off here, I'll be stopping thinking about the NBA for a little while, and I'll be thinking about New Zealand basketball, which is that's the real good stuff.
That's right, and we're only a year away from really kind of grinding up some swimming models and really ramping up.
You texted me a month ago, like, hey, do you know anywhere else besides Bookmaker that has like betting or swim lines? I'm like, fuck no, like
I
nowhere.
I can't even remember.
Just booked an Airbnb for Paris. To be there
how about that?
Like, I don't care how much money it costs me going to Ledecky versus McIntosh versus Titmus versus Erica Fairweather, New Zealand's greatest swimmer as well. She's got no chance of featuring in the medals. But yeah, I don't care how much money it costs me. I'm going to that race. That's the female version of the 2004 Popov versus Thorpe versus Hackett versus versus Phelps in Athens.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
I got one more year to
We're more
work my way
Omnium
up
guys,
the.
actually, aren't we? Fuck, remember that? I was on vacation.
Yes, I
It's like
do.
3 in
I
the
do.
morning. We're watching
Omnium cycling, women's
to-
Omnium. Yeah,
What was it? The Japanese.
the Japanese
for
woman was the
medals?
favorite, and they were at 27, and I had
We had
it was
27
under
and a half or
27 and a half.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were favored for the
then
women's
an
Omnium,
American-
the
an
last event
American
of the whole
won,
damn
yeah.
Olympics. And
Well, yeah, the girl who won
25
is
to
like-
1.
Yeah,
25
she's
to
a
1.
huge
Yeah.
prize.
Yeah.
Still don't
But
understand.
yeah, I got one more year to work my way up the org chart at NBC, and they send me to Paris to cover the swimming. So we'll see if that
There
works
you
out.
go. Yeah, yeah. You got
That was always the grand
background
plan.
for it.
That was always the grand plan. We'll see.
Yeah. What other race at in the Olympics do you think is going to be the best one? Men's 100 freestyle, Dressel versus Popovich versus Chalmers.
I don't get a good read on what's going on with Dressel.
Yeah, I mean he's just like a little bit mentally fatigued, right? But they all it's happened to everyone, isn't it?
Yeah,
Adam Peaty's done the same thing.
Sure.
All these dudes are out. Popovich is going to roll in that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
46-4 or 46-5.
I'll teach you guys about taper off the air.
Yeah, no, I think Dressel's probably going to underwhelm. If he gets back in form and shows up, that'll be a gift for the U.S. Because I don't really think it's likely. Yeah, I don't know. I think the women's 200, 400, 800 are the ones that you got to circle. Those are going to be incredible.
I think McIntosh is going to roll. Oh, I think McIntosh versus Tippis in the 200 will be great. I don't think McIntosh can win the like Ledecky's just going to win the 800. And then the thing is like, can McIntosh break the world record in like 6 events?
Yeah,
she's already got the world record in the 400 AM, the 400 free. She's gonna break the world record in the 2 AM. Does she break it in the 2 fly? Does she break it in the 2 free?
Yeah.
That's like, it's pretty sick. She might be the best. She might be the best swimmer. Like she might end up being the best female swimmer of all time.
That's big time. That's a big time statement. Worlds is in Fukuoka, Japan, in the middle of July.
Be careful, you say that.
What's it gonna take? What's it gonna take to win the 400 freestyle there? 355. Obviously, McIntosh is 356.0.
I think she's on the ascension, so I would say it's going to take 355. Yeah,
she is something different. She's sick.
For the people who stuck around, the hardcore.
Yeah, actually, the viewer count has gone up while we started talking. So I don't know what the fuck is happening. Also, I was waiting for Dan I was waiting for somebody to end the show. I forgot I'm producing today.
No, it's
Popovich breaks the 200 free world record at World Champs, 142.00 or something. He's 142.9, I think, this year.
Popovici is Romanian, Andy, if you didn't already know that. And he was a little bit. He had an underwhelming Tokyo.
I haven't done well.
And he's been incredible since.
Broke the 100 free world record.
His 200 in Budapest last year was pretty.
The Fukuoka is
impressive.
Is that Japan or what are we talking?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Noops hit me with the location of the Billie Jean King Cup. Asked me where I thought it was this morning, and I said it was a suburb of Dallas. It's Kazakhstan.
The other one,
fucking that close.
I haven't been following
Billie Jean King Cup that much.
Other one that goes down is Leon Marchand breaks Michael Phelps' 400 AM record, that was the sickest race.
Yeah, that's due to come down. Yeah.
Yep.
I lost a lot of respect for Phelps after he lost to that shark. Do you remember that shit?
I do. They had a betting market for that. Talk about your soft markets.
You could bet on that.
Yeah. The old 5 dimes. Did you ever bet at 5 dimes back in the day, or was it gone by the time you really got to the?
You could bet at that sort of stuff in New Zealand. Actually, New Zealand was a country where you can bet it everywhere. But yeah, I never was betting at 5 dimes. Too early for me.
Was that in your parlay? God damn it! I'm trying to end the show, and was that in your parlay? It was like Putin gets reelected.
Putin gets reelected, parlayed with the Shark beat Phelps.
It was like OJ gets parole.
OJ gets parole.
That was a fucked up parlay.
Mayweather over McGregor, and Joey Chestnut to win the hot dog eating contest. Yeah,
and it paid even.
Put them all together. I got even money on that. Yeah.
All right. I'm hitting the music.
And as you know, when you start parlaying those things, the limits go up for some reason. Why that happens, who knows? But you want to get good exposure on some Rort, you got to find a couple of legs to put it with.
That's it.
Yeah.
Play the music, Andy. Let's get out of here.
Playing it. We're calling it. This is good. It's fun. I'm jacked for the playoffs. Appreciate you coming on. We'll see you guys next week. Hit a thumbs up on the way out. Rate, subscribe, review, all that jazz. See you guys. Outro.
That was. It didn't feel like a 2-hour pod. It went
There's so much that goes
blur.
on in the NBA, man.
I know. I think we gave it fair coverage, and I think process stuff we hit on was pretty
We didn't talk
important.
about the Kings.